Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is one of the Sunday question and answer videos. I think next weekend will be Subscriber Sunday, and then we'll get right back to these after that. I still have just tons of questions you guys have asked. Really great questions that I'll continue to go through. And if you want, like I say, if you want to continue to ask them at the bottom of these videos each week, that's fine. And like I say, I'm trying to pick ones that I think will help the most people. I am introducing a local giveaway in this video that I will do the drawing for in a couple weeks when I get back to the question and answer videos. I've got a white wedding hydrangea and a Delta series crepe myrtle. I've got videos coming out on these, and I've got, like I say, I've got 2 extra pieces. The way you'll enter to win the 2 plants, and this is a beautiful crepe myrtle here. This is a, like I say, this is a Delta Fusion crepe myrtle. It's just starting to bloom now. These have a black foliage. They're really, really beautiful crepe myrtles. I've got one planted over here in the vegetable foodscape, whatever we're going to call that, that type of gardening over there with the vegetables and the shrubs and trees all mixed together. I've got one of those over there. That video is coming out pretty soon. I've also, you will have likely seen my 2-minute white wedding video when this video comes out. This one's just starting to flower here. Beautiful pieces from the Southern Living Plant Collection that I used in the videos. And then now I am going to just, like I say, give them away locally. So just if you're local to me in Central North Carolina and you can come and grab them, then just put local down at the bottom of this video, and I will pull from comments that say local. You know, don't drive $60 worth of gas out of your car to come get a plant, but there'll be 2 different winners. I'll pull 2 different winners. But if you're local to me in Central North Carolina, you have a chance to win the white wedding hydrangea or the Delta series crepe myrtle. And like I say, I'll do that drawing 2 Sundays from now. So let's get started on some questions. I had somebody ask me about, you know, their furnace blows out of their house directly onto a space that says super, super, super hot, and if there were plants that I would recommend for that space. Pay attention in your area to what the Department of Transportation is using in your state in the medians on the highway and on the edges of the highway. Those plants are typically going to be your friend. They use a lot of cannas. There's a canna right here with this red flowering canna that I've had on this table, you know, these weeks of doing these videos. Cannas are something that the Department of Transportation uses in North Carolina in difficult places. In the medians, that's probably a plant that would work okay. Grasses, you know, they use lots of grasses out there, and you know, especially if you have native grasses to your area, ornamental grasses to your area. And then there are a lot of herbs like rosemary, sage, thyme. These Mediterranean herbs will probably work in that area if you wanted to create a little herb garden around that. Rosemary is definitely something that can take the heat. Elephant ears would be something else that would come to mind that could go in that space. A lot of that stuff's going to go dormant. Rosemary wouldn't go dormant. It'd stay evergreen if there's enough sun in that space. But I'm looking toward Mediterranean plants probably that can take that dry air that's coming out of that furnace vent. And then, like I say, pay attention to what the DOT is using on the side of the roads, because they've got a lot of experience with what they can plant on the side of a highway and not come back and water it. Okay, somebody asked about their blueberries in containers being iron deficient. It was from my video where I talked about how to plant blueberries in containers and using peat moss and bark mix to make sure that the pH is low enough. Blueberries are extremely heavy iron feeders. I've got a video on my channel that looks like I'm, you know, a terrible teacher probably, but that's about why pH is so important. That's a video that I would highly recommend you guys take a look at. We need the pH to be low for heavy iron feeders. So heavy iron feeding plants need a lot, are like acid loving soil. And so here's the thing: if you get the peat moss and the bark mix right in the container and it's still iron deficient, you're actually missing the iron. And so keep that in mind. You can use ironite or something like that, or make sure you're using fertilizers like Hollytone or something like that. Make sure that there's iron in the list of ingredients. But that's my guess. Or alternatively, you could be keeping it a little too wet and the plant's actually just having a hard time accessing those nutrients. But my guess is normally the problem in the ground is the iron is there, but the pH isn't correct. In the container, it could be the pH is correct and the iron is missing. Okay, Somebody asked what mulch I like to use. I really like to use triple shredded hardwood mulch when I can, but I'm cautious with it because it does build up over time and you can really start to build a pretty quick layer. I do let it compost pretty thoroughly between applications. I don't put like, there was another question, I'm gonna put these two together, about somebody asked about using like they had seen that 4 to 6 inches of mulch was the right amount of mulch. I think that's a little too much. I would probably aim toward like 3 inches of mulch in late March. Ideally, in an ideal world, and no one's going to do this, I'd put about 3 inches of mulch down in late March, and then toward the end of the summer, around August, as the fall weeds are thinking about germinating, henbit and chickweed and all those kinds of things, we put down another 1.5 inches or so of mulch at that time. That would be ideal because it would give the mulch time to break down between each time and not end up really building up and starting to, it can become anaerobic over time if it just kind of starts rotting below this mulch, this ever increasing, stack of wood that you're putting on top of it. I know that there's a lot of videos about, excuse me, deep mulch, using deep mulch for gardening and that kind of thing. A lot of those videos, I think the main person who kind of led everybody down that road is in kind of a desert climate. If you're in the southeast like we are and it rains so much, really deep mulch like that can end up staying too wet and keeping your plants kind of anaerobic. If you were going to use a deep mulch method for gardening in the southeast, you really need to let it break down for a period of time before you start actually planting things in it. I went off track a little bit there, but triple shredded hardwood mulch, if my mulch starts to get too thick, I rotate over to pine straw, and the pine straw is better at letting the soil breathe and dry out, and that hardwood breaks down a little more, and then I go back to hardwood. That's how I do it. Let's see. Somebody asked about replanting plants. Like they see a video of mine, and then they realize that they may have planted something poorly. And then, should I dig them up? I get that should I dig them up question a lot. I would only dig them up if they're doing poorly. When I talk about what is the best way to plant a plant, I'm not saying that the other way will kill them 100% of the time. I'm just trying to give you a set of techniques that will give you the highest percentage overall over time. But you can probably dig out the clay and throw it away, and 80% of the time the plant's going to be fine. I'm just trying to get you to 98% of the time the plant's going to be fine. And so if you plant them, I don't care what technique you used, if they seem to be thriving, if they seem to be doing fine, just leave them be. But know in the back of your mind, if something starts to go sideways, it may have been that you planted it too deep, or you used too much organic material, or that kind of thing. And you can just pop them up and raising them. And really, it's not so much about replanting them. If I feel like I've planted something poorly, honestly, I don't really replant them. I'll go out and take a shovel and stick it underneath it and pop it up and try to tuck some soil back underneath it and actually just raise it up in the same space. And usually that is enough to rescue plants that are struggling from being poorly planted. Okay, somebody asked about growing lavender in the South, and there are a couple varieties that Southern Living Plant Collection has now. I know there's one called Merlot that's a variegated, and I think the other one's called Phenomenal, that were bred and selected for the South. I saw somebody say that that lavender was easy or something in their area. They've never tried to grow it in the Southeast ever. There's two problems we have. It's not just the soil moisture. Well, it's several problems. It's the soil moisture. It's the which is like the clay soils that some of us have in the Southeast, and then it's the amount of rain that we can get, and seasonal just drowning that we can get. And the biggest problem is actually the soil pH. Most of us in the Southeast have a low soil pH, or acid soils, and which is totally fine for 90% of the plants that we're trying to grow, but lavender actually likes a more alkaline soil, and so that's one of our biggest problems. So you're going to need, for me, and they like lean soils, meaning not a lot of nutrients, and so that tends to lead toward a desert climate or a Mediterranean climate more so. So let's say you were going to get that Phenomenal or Merlot lavender. You can check on plantsbymail.com and see if they have them. Those were done for the Southeast, but I would still raise them up some and use like pine bark, which is going to be a little lean. Compost would be too rich in nutrients, and you'd get a lot of green growth on your lavender, not a lot of flowers. So use bark, raise them up, and add some lime. Lime is going to be important with lavender. I get a little bag of lime and maybe add a handful to the planting, in the planting soil around it, and mix that in. That's how you do it. Kind of complicated. And occasionally I'll see a lavender plant that's just really, doing quite well. But for most of us in the Southeast, they can be a little tough. But I think through plant breeding, like I said, Southern Living Plant Collection starting to introduce some for the Southeast. Okay, another long answer. Okay, somebody asked about what to use around their PG hydrangeas. They've got some PG hydrangeas, which are panicle hydrangeas like this White Wedding. This White Wedding is an improved panicle hydrangea that's more compact. PG was like the original one we were using. Gets quite big, beautiful flowers on it, but it can stretch a little, and so I'm assuming that what they're talking about is it's kind of naked at the bottom. That's kind of how PG grows in the landscape. I'm going to give you guys all a cheat right now. If you'll type in PG hydrangeas into Google and then hit the Google Images tab, there are lots of people who have designed yards, with things around their PG hydrangeas. Some of the photos will be, just the plant. It might be a plant at a nursery or whatever, but a lot of the photos will be of people having used them in the landscape in different ways that they're using them. And so I use that as a cheat. Sometimes I'll just go to Google Images and search for that particular plant. One of the first images I saw was somebody had put boxwoods around their PG hydrangeas to cover up the bottom of them and made a very formal space out of it. That a lot of you would like that, and a lot of you might not like that, because one of the next images I saw, somebody had used ornamental grasses and daylilies around them, and it was completely wild looking, cottage garden like, and two very different approaches to covering up the bottom of their PG hydrangeas. But some of you would have liked, the formal one, and some of you may like the informal one. But use that as a cheat. So Jim's answer to that question is cheat. Go on Google Images and scan through and see how other people are using the plant, and then don't necessarily copy it, but you can just come up with ideas of whether or not you want it to be formal or whatever. Okay. Somebody asked me a question about straightening trees that have leaned over, newer planted trees that have leaned over, where they had staked them low, but then the top of the plant has ended up leaning over. The technique I used, and I don't know if I could actually demonstrate this in a video, but the technique I use is, let's see, this is the tree in the center right here, this pin. I actually use 3 stakes driven into the ground in a triangle about a foot away from the trunk of the tree. And so it's ideally you would use something like galvanized pipe, like the top rail fence from a chain link fence, but you can use a wooden stake of some kind and pound it down in the ground as best you can, and have 3 vertical stakes, about a foot from the tree in a triangle around it, and then you can tie the tree at multiple places going up the, between your little triangle. You can tie to the tree, and you can straighten it back up into the middle of that triangle. If the force of the tree is too much and it's pulling the stakes in toward the center, then you actually stake the stakes to the ground. Okay, rather than tying it up on the top of the tree and tying that to the ground. Okay, you actually just tie the stake back to the ground, and that way you don't really have anything on the tree that's really pulling it with a lot of force. And so I use 3 stakes in a triangle around the tree, hammered into the ground, and then I can tie it low, middle, and high directly to the tree itself. And then if I need additional support for my stakes, I tie those back to the ground. I hope some of that made sense. Okay, if you're local to me in central North Carolina, I'm close to Raleigh, North Carolina. If you're within a reasonable distance of Raleigh, North Carolina, put local in the bottom, and you can have a chance to win these 2 plants. Or I'm going to do a drawing, two people, 1 plant each. And the first winner will get the crepe myrtle. The second winner will get the hydrangea. That's the way I'll do it when I draw the names in 2 weeks. Thank you very much for watching this video.